Chapter 8 Out of the Wind. A howl came again from the hillside, then another howl, and another, until there was a chorus of howls. "Oh no! The wolves are after the horses!" cried Annie. Before Jack could think, everything happened at once. The three Takis started galloping away from the wolves. They were heading toward Jack and Annie. Their hooves pounded against the ground. The howling noises grew louder. More wolves moved down the slope of the hill. The wolves scrambled onto the plain. They started chasing after the horses. The Taki kept running toward Jack and Annie. "Now's the time!" shouted Annie. "We have to sing." "Sing what? How?" called Jack. "Just sing!" cried Annie. "That's what Morgan told us to do. Sing of wild things. Let the wind do the rest. Spin air into song." She stood up on her bike pedals and held her head high. Annie sang to the tune of "The Wheels on the Bus." She sang as loud as she could. "The horses on the plain are running and running. The horses on the plain are running back home." It wasn't a good song, but Annie kept singing. Jack stood on his pedals. He made up words to the same tune. "The wind on the plain is blowing and blowing. The wind on the plain is blowing them home." Together, Jack and Annie sang as loud as they could. They bellowed the words of their song over and over. Suddenly, the wind seemed to capture their voices and fill the night with their song. Strange whistling and low rumblings began to shake the earth. All the sounds blended together perfectly. And then the wind spun the song into a swirling column of air. The whirlwind swirled over the grass, growing bigger and bigger, until out of its swirl a beautiful white stallion leapt forward. "Wow!" shouted Annie. "See that?" "Yes!" Jack yelled, though he could hardly believe his eyes. The magnificent horse had a long neck and a flowing mane. The horse raced toward the Taki. The wind shifted direction, and the mountain bikes swerved to the left. With the rushing wind pushing them across the plain, Jack and Annie raced after the white horse. The huge stallion halted before the oncoming Taki. He reared up on his hind legs. He neighed loudly, as if commanding the smaller horses to follow. Then the stallion started back toward the entrance of the nature reserve. The three Taki galloped after him. Jack's and Annie's bikes swerved again and sped after the horses. Jack could hear the wolves howling behind them. The beautiful white horse galloped over the silver sea of moonlit grass. The Taki galloped behind him. The mountain bikes zoomed faster. The wolves couldn't keep up. The sounds of their howls grew fainter as they fell farther behind. Finally, they faded away completely. Soon, only the wind and the thumping of horse hooves could be heard. Nearing the fenced area, the white stallion and the Taki slowed to a trot. The wind fell to a whisper. Jack's and Annie's bikes coasted to a stop. From inside the corral came the sound of neighing. "Jack, let them in!" Annie shouted. Jack jumped off his bike and hurried to the gate. The gate was tied shut with a thin rope. Jack untied the knot. He threw open the gate. The three Taki trotted into the corral. They galloped off to join their herd. Jack closed the gate firmly. He tied the knot tightly. "Done!" he shouted. He nearly collapsed with relief. "Whew, good work," said Annie. Jack looked around for the mysterious white stallion. "Where is he?" he asked. "I don't know," said Annie. "He was here, then he wasn't." "Where did he come from?" asked Jack. "The wind, maybe," said Annie. "But how did he just disappear?" said Jack. "Maybe, I don't know, the wind made him," said Annie. "And now the wind's disappeared, so—" For the first time, Jack realized the wind had stopped completely. There wasn't a breeze or even a whisper. The night was still, except for insects chirping in the grass and soft snuffling sounds in the horse's corral. Jack took a deep breath. "We'll figure it out later," he said. "We'd better go back to the yurt before Tuya's family gets worried about us." "Right," said Annie. Jack and Annie returned their mountain bikes to the bike rack. Then, by the light of the moon, they started back toward the nomad camp. Jack was so tired he could barely put one foot in front of the other. When they reached the camp, everything was quiet. They headed to Tuya's home, opened the red door, and slipped inside. All the candles had nearly burnt out. Tuya's family had gone to bed. Someone was snoring. In the dim light, Jack and Annie lay down on the 2 low couches. They covered themselves with sheepskins. "Night," said Annie. "Night," breathed Jack, closing his eyes. He heard the crackle of the fire in the stove. The wind was gone. The wolves were gone. On the first night of their new lives, all the wild horses were safely back home.